I'm Jeff Wilson. I'm President and CEO of Precipitate Gold Corporation. Precipitate trades on the TSX Venture under the symbol PRG. We are a junior exploration company focused on discovery stage assets. Our primary focus at this point is the Dominican Republic. We've got a earn-in agreement with Barrick Gold Corporation on one of our assets, and we own our other two Dominican assets 100% and are looking to advance those as we move forward.
Jeff, good to see you. Good to see you. We're going to do something slightly different today in the sense I don't necessarily want to interview you. What I want to do is explore the basic premise of this as an investment prospect for me. Okay, I see, what the market is pricing you at, circa $10 million. But I also see the assets that you've got. I see the JV with Barrick, and for me, there's a lot to like. But I'm trying to work out if I'm drinking the Kool-Aid or even worse, you are. And maybe if you don't mind, I'm going to run through a bunch of questions, trying to understand what it is that you've got and why you like it. Is that okay with you?
I look forward to it. Yeah, bring it on.
Okay. Well, let's start off with, I think that one of the things on the list that people are slightly concerned about is, the jurisdiction, Dominican Republic. Does mining happen in country?
Yeah, it absolutely does. It as you say, it's not necessarily thought of front of mind when people think of mineral exploration and mining, but more often thought of resorts and beaches. But it is a country that hosts one of the largest gold mining operations in the world, and that's our partner Barrick, who've been operating the Pueblo Viejo mine for several years. It's a world-class deposit that actually is moving toward project expansion. They're looking at investing another $1 billion, billion with a B, into increasing the size and scale of that operation. So that's one of the top contributors to the country's economy. So can mining happen? Does mining happen in the Dominican Republic? Yes. I think what we've tried to move forward is and be at the forefront of is mineral exploration and identifying new deposits and bringing about new regions of the country that have maybe been underappreciated or underexplored, and identifying new frontiers for where mineral exploration and mining can occur in that country and be an ongoing contributor to the economy.
Right. Okay. So Barrick operating successfully in country. I think they've invested, somewhere nearly $5 billion in infrastructure investment at Pueblo Viejo, but and more to come. Let's talk about how the country breaks down. Obviously, every region is different, every state is different, every province is different, all the way around the world. And mining's not, it is a tricky subject because you need social license to operate locally. It's not just federally. But if you don't mind, let's start federally first, and kind of come down to the region that you're in. Federally, clearly, as a big financial contributor to the economy, I think mining is sort of as positive. Is that right? Is it they don't mind it? It's not a fight. Barrick is not operating, they're against their will.
No, 100%. It is definitely from a political standpoint and from the government standpoint. They recognize the importance of mining. They see the significance of that contribution, both in terms of taxes and royalties and job creation, et cetera, that Pueblo Viejo and other mines in the country, and specifically in that same region, have brought to the country. So politically, there is a strong appreciation for mining. And so you've got a government that I think appreciates what mining can do and has, in certain cases, indicated a desire to increase revenue generated from mining. So yes, I think it's politically, a friendly, open jurisdiction.
If we go down to the regional basis, obviously, actually, let's look at the project. You've got Pueblo Grande, which is that's the JV one, right?
Correct.
Right, and that's but they're kind of butted up right next to each other. That makes a lot of sense. And they got Ponton as well, slightly further to the east, I think.
Yes,
is that right?
Yep.
Right. Okay. But the project, which I think you're looking to sort of, I guess, wait and see what happens with Gold Quest, is obviously the Juan de Herrera project over on the west side of the country. Let's talk about the kind of regional differences between where your projects are and any of the kind of political issues or social issues that you're having to deal with? I mean, what can you tell us?
Yeah, I mean, no question. As small as the Dominican Republic is as a country, and it is geographically very small, there are, like in any jurisdiction, there are distinctions between, as you said earlier, between regions, between provinces, etc. And so we see that in the Dominican Republic, where Barrick is operating, for example, there's been a mine there for many years. In fact, the Barrick mine was previously nationalized and run by the Dominican government. Unfortunately, they made a bit of an environmental disaster out of that. And it was Barrick that sort of came in and cleaned that up and took over that operation and has been doing it, a fantastic job in that regard. However, in other parts of the country, like where our Wanda Herrera is located, these are more historically agricultural districts and areas where mining has not existed in the past. So you have a different mindset and a different sentiment as it relates to the concept of companies coming in and exploring and looking for mining deposits. So there's certainly, and I would say this is universal. I mean, this is global, that people have an immediate disdain usually about mining and what that might mean to their backyard. So it's a matter of educating, of informing, of consulting, working collaboratively with people to generate an understanding of what everybody's trying to achieve, and hopefully, move forward in a way that's beneficial to everyone. And that takes time. My quick response to the timelines that go into that are, it's very, very difficult to find attractive, economically extractable mineral deposits, and so finding something like that is a needle in a haystack. And so, to then have to deal with some local issues, some political issues, some community issues, I think that's just part of our business now. And so the taller challenge, I think, is to find a deposit. And this is a region where Wanda Herrera is located, where a 3.5 million ounce gold equivalent deposit has been identified. And there's substantial exploration potential throughout the region to find more. And so we think that's worth a little bit of patience and time and effort to try to move forward.
Right. Okay. And I guess here's the question I'm actually trying to ask is, why hang on? Why wait? Why not go and find something else? Is this going to be valuable at some point in the future? And for it to be valuable, what needs to happen today? We're looking at the case of, Gold Quest, with their Romero project, trying to, get people on board, get that social license, as it were. How long have they been doing that? Are they going to get it across the line?
Yeah, it's been a long process, and I think they've done a wonderful job at focusing on the areas that are important to local people and communicating with local people. So I think they've done a good job. I think one of the issues that's magnified this to this point is that this is a junior company advancing a project through development. And so, and frankly, when I say this, I mean Gold Quest. And Gold Quest is essentially a single asset company. And so there's a real, spotlight on the advancement of this. And I sort of look at it as if this project were in, say, the hands of a mid-tier or a major, this would be a quiet, advancement in the background while other projects are generating cash flow, and they would have the time to sort of massage this and bring it along until it was ready to come into the fold. In this case, there's a brighter spotlight or a stronger spotlight because, all chips are in for Gold Quest on this project. I think for me, as it relates to politics, and we have to be careful here as we sort of speak about politics versus sort of community, because they're distinct, but they are intertwined. In that I'm, my communication with the Dominican government has always been quite positive and supportive about trying to bring about additional mining operations within the country. But they recognize, and I recognize, they're politicians. They need to remain popular with their constituents. And so there is a sense of, for Gold Quest, go into the community and get local people to buy in and get them on side. And that takes time. And there's a lot of history in the mining industry that we need to sort of get past and get over. And companies like Gold Quest, like ourselves, need to be look at things differently, and we need to make sure that we're including those local communities. So it takes some time, but I think the upside or the opportunity here is the potential for a multi-million ounce district. There's currently 3.5 million ounces gold equivalent. Both Gold Quest and Precipitate have multiple mineralized targets that have been delineated through drilling and ongoing exploration that have all sort of stalled here recently while we wait this process out. But at such time as the green light goes back on from a sort of a community and political comfort level, there's no shortage of additional targets to be explored. And I think this is an area where we certainly as Precipitate would love to reactivate and get going again to see if we can identify more mineable deposits.
Let me jump back a bit if I can. Let me get some comfort from your ability to construct the best setup for yourselves. So obviously, if I look at Pueblo Grande, right, you got $5 million in cash and a 3% NSR, was it? Sorry, I think it was.
There's 3 on some of the ground, and yes, there's 3% on some ground.
Right. Okay. Fine. So in terms of that, and you've got currently in the bank, your material says you got circa $5 million in the bank, which obviously that's better than a lot of kind of cash stranded and cash strapped companies at the moment, and you don't want to blow through that. I get that, and we will come to that. But in terms of what else does that deal structure on the Pueblo Grande look like for you going forward if Barrick continue to with their exploration and to develop that?
Yeah, I mean it's a unique situation for us because we're not we didn't ever set out to be a project generator where we wanted to bring in a major to partner up. But in this instance, we saw a substantial size land package that was going to require a significant amount of time and effort to advance. Junior companies, sometimes you're better off to let the big boys finance these things, and so that's the deal we entered into. Partway through the deal, as you touched on, we entered into a deal where they needed some ground for infrastructure. It was sterile ground. It was ground that had been drilled, and we all knew there was nothing there. And so we carved that out, gave that to Barrick for a cash payment of $5 million US, and that royalty you discussed. And so moving forward here now, Barrick must spend a total of $10 million over 6 years. We are 4 years into that 6-year term. They've spent $5 million to date. They've got another 5 to spend by 2026. And they've also got to deliver a pre-feasibility study at the end of that term. So there is a fairly aggressive requirement there for Barrick to spend aggressively and to move the project forward, in exchange for them earning, if they complete that, earning a 70% interest in the project. And so that's us sort of carried through to that point. At such time as if they did earn and they had a 70% interest, we have a right to call upon Barrick to contribute or arrange for our 30% financing so that we don't have to unceremoniously dilute ourselves as the junior party in that arrangement. So we think it's a well-structured deal. Having said that, the objective here is for Barrick to find something world-class and something that can feed into their existing world-class operation. And, whether or not that, materializes in a 70-30 joint venture, or there's some other maybe more eloquent end to that, time will tell.
Right. Okay. So you there's something in the back pocket there which has some real value going forward, assuming they spent the next $5 million over the next 2 years, and that project moves forward. So that you kind of got that sitting there. And so the other project was Ponton. What's going on there?
Well, Ponton and Wanda Herrera, we both own 100%. Actually, all of our projects we own 100%. There's no underlying payments. We don't owe somebody. We don't have to do work commitments and spend money. So we have full discretion on those. Ponton, it's a small project. It's very close to Barrick's Pueblo Viejo. It's about 25-30 kilometers to the east. We did do a drill program there a couple of years ago. We were sort of stalled by some of the locals. And frankly, the reason why the locals sort of objected to us being there was that they thought we were Barrick because we had just announced our deal with Barrick. And so they sort of thought we were one and the same. And so they saw big dollar signs and major company and thought, hey, we either want something out of this or you're not going to have it. And because it's so well situated in terms of road access and that kind of thing, it was easy for people to come and be problematic. So, and this speaks, there's a little bit of a sidebar here as it relates to the government. We got an enormous amount of help and assistance from the Dominican government at that time to try to help smooth that out, and, wanting to see us move forward with the drill campaign that we had set out to conduct. In the end, we decided that the best course of action was to just sort of pull back, communicate with local people. We commenced a bunch of initiatives. That was COVID time, so we brought in some vaccination for the locals. We brought in a bunch of seedlings for tree planting, thousands of trees in the area. So we decided that the better course of action was, look, Ponton's not going anywhere. We own it 100%. We can sit on that. Let's make sure that the local people understand that we're here for the long term. We want to be part of the community and part of the solution. And so we've sort of, again, put that on the back burner for now until the right time emerges. So
okay. Yeah. So treading carefully, right? And I appreciate being so candid about all this, because, like I said, I kind of want to know what I'm getting to bed with here. But yeah, because the projects, the assets, I should say, look really interesting. And if I have to wait a little bit longer, I kind of don't mind, as long as I know there's potential end in sight. The fact that people are doing, mining in country already is very, very comforting. And this is the same problem being faced, in Canada, US, Australia, Africa, you name it. It is where we're at with mining at the moment. So just if I can jump back over to Juan de Herrera, right? So agriculture in nature and history, that side of the country. What is it that the locals want from this? Is it a case of outright, we don't want mining of any description here, or is there some sense of what it would take to get over the line? With obviously with Gold Quest having spent a lot of time on this, it must have moved forward. Are you able to say it has moved forward?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there's, again, nothing is as linear and black and white as we want it to be. So yes, this is largely an agricultural region. Unfortunately, and I don't think it's because it's an agricultural region, but unfortunately, it is also one of the most impoverished regions of the country. So the agricultural practices are not particularly modern, to say the least. And so you have this combination of, agricultural history, people who rely heavily on the land for their, for their livelihood, but also not doing so in a particularly efficient manner. And so that's led to a lot of exit. A lot of young people don't stick around, and so et cetera, et cetera. There's not a lot of jobs. So what we find, and so when you talk about sort of local opposition, what we find is that local people, generally speaking, are not opposed. They may or may not be in full support, but they're not really opposed to the idea of mining. What they're in favor of is a better economic outlook. What they're in favor of is a job. What they're in favor of is their kids going to school and getting educated. And being able to stay in their communities without having to go to the capital city or somewhere else to make a living. So what we find, and this is, this probably happens in a lot of jurisdictions, that, often it's small factions, it's special interest groups, it's people who want to sort of hold on to some level of power over the people, if you will, that pose problems because, mining comes in, suddenly people have more income. Suddenly more income means their kids go to school. Now you've got a more educated population. Suddenly these special interest groups, or whatever they may be, business leaders, suddenly become less powerful and influential. So that's really what we're dealing with here is, how do we position this such that this is to the benefit of the people? And for the most part, people recognize that or are open to that. And open to hearing about that. And so local politicians, again, there are some who are in favor, some who are not. At the end of the day, they're swayed by their constituents and what's popular that will get them reelected. And what we've been finding through the work that's been done by Gold Quest over the last several years is that there does appear to be a diminishing number of absolute opposition and a greater number of people who are at least neutral, if not open to the idea of mineral exploration being a better future. Because as much as it's an agricultural district, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to put two and together. You say we're an agricultural district, but we're not making any money, and we can't keep people in the community to do the work. Anybody can figure out eventually maybe something here needs to change, and maybe there's some synergies where we don't have to. It doesn't have to come at the cost. One doesn't have to come at the cost of another. We could, these things can coexist. There can be mineral exploration and mining. There can be farming. And perhaps we can help. Maybe we can help improve, irrigation systems. Perhaps we can improve, access, infrastructure, various other things. When I say we, the mining companies, that's net beneficial to everybody. So that's the kind of way that we're approaching this. And again, finding a mineral deposit or an attractive exploration region is hard around the world. It's hard to do. And so when you find one where you've then got to take a look, okay, what are the obstacles? Do we think that we can overcome these? Are they manageable? That's why, I think we've decided to hunker down here and put in the effort and the time and the patience to see this through, because we think that the end result or the end prize is worth the battle.
It's kind of interesting, actually, when you look at the kind of population and the population breakdown in terms of, age, etc., the young wanting to dash off to the big cities, different type of job or employment, getting away from maybe agriculture, from which the parents and grandparents have done. What is the youth's attitude to mining? Because I think generally around the world, certainly in Europe, the young equate mining to something that's negative, even though it helps them to, construct things like their mobile phone and laptops and cars and everything else that they want to use on a daily basis. You kind of got that kind of pushback. Is that sentiment there, or is the youth actually a kind of a group of people who could help mining?
Yeah, I think the Dominican youth is probably pretty similar to what we see around the world, where they've sort of been raised in a time where mining has sort of been pegged as the bad guy, so to speak, and so there is that. But again, I think, like with any part of the world, and we see this in Canada as well, people are driven by how things impact their pocketbook and their families. And so when young people, and again, we don't hire thousands of people for mineral exploration, but if we need 3 people, local labor guys, we usually hire 16, because we can afford it and we want to include more people so that we're benefiting a few more people's lives. And perhaps they there's a greater number of people that sort of want us back. Again, we're talking about a small number of people, but it's easy enough for us to hire more people for labor type work, and give everybody a little bit of a flavor of how we can help their lives. Again, exploration is tricky because, again, there's no guarantees. We could go out and spend millions of dollars in years in the field and not find anything that's going to become a mine, and so then we sort of move on to another location. So we have to be careful in terms of the promises that we make to people, but engaging locals and young people has been our way of relating to the community, because it's often younger people that we engage for employment because they've got the strength to be able to hike up into the mountains and carry around bags of rocks.
Right. Okay. Well, look, I'm building a picture up here. Okay. So I get the kind of the Barrick value, and I get maybe future value that if things continue to, progress there. With Juanda Herrera, remind me what we're looking at. Remind me, talk to me about grades, and talk to me what we know in terms of the data and why you're hanging around, why you think it's such a good asset.
Yeah, so it was an area that, again, the discovery of Gold Quest was what we would call a blind discovery, in that there was nothing really sticking out of the ground. There's not a lot of outcropping in this belt. There's some for sure, but really geophysics was sort of the tool. So when we picked up the ground, we didn't know much about it other than it was next to Gold Quest, who had just made this world-class discovery. And we did some initial prospecting, and we got some fairly high-grade surface samples, soil samples that drew us to a couple of key areas. And again, you've got this big land package. You vector in on sort of, the stuff that lights up the brightest, the earliest. And that for us was a zone called the Ginger Ridge. We went in, we drilled that in 2014, I think it was, and we had a discovery. We delineated, an intercept of, I think it was 20 meters of multiple grams per ton gold, and it was sort of, game on for us, if you will, in terms of, something a little bit more substantial than just being proximal to the other guys. Since then, we've done various sort of fits and starts because of the capital markets and access to cash, and being able to sort of do sustained exploration was difficult. Sort of that 2014 to 2017, 18 timeframe, things were pretty jilted. It was hot and cold in the market. So we'd raise some money, we'd do some work. So we've done a total of 3 drill programs, I think, in total. Maybe a dozen holes at the most. So not a lot. But what we did do of real consequence was, before we sort of took a pause and pulled everybody out of there, because we decided we were going to join forces, if you will, with GoldQuest, and sort of pull back in exploration until there was some clarity with permitting. We did a broad project-wise soil sampling and rock sampling program. We collected 17,000 samples in total. We had a Canadian crew down there, and before we sent them home, we said, look, tip to tail, take samples throughout this entire project. We sat on those samples, even though we scanned them with an XRF. We sat on those samples, again, saying we're going to spend $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 in assays for a project that we've kind of put on ice here. Let's just set aside what we think are the best looking samples for such time as we want to go back in and sample them. We did sample those recently, and that lit up there's about 8,000 samples that we thought were worth sampling. So we sampled those, and out of that arose 8 new mineralized anomalies. So some zones here that previous to us, we had no indication that there was anything of interest there, have now sort of lit up as being anomalous, at least. we're going to go back and do more detailed work and better understand. And of course, of those 8, not all 8 are going to stand up, and we'll knock those ones that don't off the chart, so to speak. But and that's kind of been the basis for some of our recent news releases over the last month or so, relating to kind of the reemergence of that project by way of some new mineralized zones that have now, in a subsequent round of work, reported or delivered some pretty splashy high-grade gold samples.
Right, but I mean, if you don't mind throwing some of those numbers at me, because what I'm looking at is here, you've got GoldQuest, which has got whatever measured and indicated resource of about just over 2.2 million ounces. They quote their numbers in equivalents, but whatever, about 3.5 gram gold equivalent number. So it's not too shabby. You were sort of like, I mean, you've literally wrapped yourself around their project, it seems, on the south west side of this. Are you seeing the sorts of numbers that they are, or is it too early? And because it's all, predominantly sort of, sample work, trenching, etc., is it too early to kind of get into sort of looky-likey type conversations?
No, I think it's not too early, and I think that's been part of the story all along. And in part, GoldQuest has seen some pretty splashy numbers throughout their project, over more than a decade. Part of the discrepancy between GoldQuest and Precipitate is GoldQuest, on the back of their drill discovery, was able to raise $20-odd million, and they were able to be very aggressive with exploration. And so they did a much more consistent and detailed programs of sampling. And so they've got more samples to report because they were out there collecting far more samples than we were, where we would have a guy or two going around kicking rocks or trying to take our priority targets to the next level. Now that we've done this broader project-wide campaign, we're starting to see some numbers that are more akin to what's been announced by GoldQuest. These, in our last news releases, we reported 73 grams per ton gold, 30 grams per ton gold, 16 grams per ton gold in rock and float samples. So these are, substantial, exceptional high-grade gold results or values. We also see some fairly compelling copper values in the southern part of our project. We got a grab sample of 13%, a rock chip sample of over 13% copper. several years ago in a zone called the Southwest Zone. So there is similar affinities to what Gold Quest has on the precipitate ground, and perhaps equally important, or maybe most important, a lot of the mineralized areas or target areas on Gold Quest ground, I shouldn't say many, several, butt up against the claim boundary and likely extend onto our ground, or we've evidenced that it extends onto our ground, and vice versa. So, the mineralization of this belt sort of trends in a northwest southeast kind of direction, and so there's no reason why the mineralization seen on one side of the claim boundary wouldn't be seen on the other. So we think that there's a lot of mineralization that cuts right across the claim boundary. And so, yeah, we're seeing a lot of the same geological environment or affinities that Gold Quest is seeing as well. We haven't yet found, our Romero, so to speak, but we also haven't done a particularly consistent or sustained drill campaign. And so I think there's a lot of areas where, given the green light, to plow ahead and do a substantial drill program, there's multiple targets that we would test with, several holes and substantial number of meters.
Right. And what's the game plan here? Because I get the waiting bit, right? Gold Quest is going through a process phase. You're kind of wrapped in butting up across a very long border with that. I mean, how many kilometers are we talking about? It kind of looks like
it's about 40, 80. It's about 40 kilometers of of claim boundary that we're up against. Yep.
Right. Okay. So there's a lot to be said there. But so what's the game plan here? Let's say the waiting bit. We'll assume that's going to happen, and if I'm a patient investor, I'll go. It'll take how long it takes, but at some point there's some real value here. And I want to explore two things there, which is one, what's the game plan if Gold Quest suddenly get the kind of go ahead, get the social license, the buy-in, as it were, to get back after that project? Is it for you to go and raise money and do it yourself, or is this another Barrick situation where you go, well, it kind of makes sense if we kind of do something together here? How do you view that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few different ways to skin the cat on that. I think ultimately for me, part of the reason why we've over a longer period of time have paused in terms of doing work, it really is market perception. And so, what do we do with shareholder money that is accretive and that's going to add value? And I would say that the company has taken the view over the past several years that for us to go out and do substantial work at Wanda Herrera and deliver impressive results is likely to fall upon deaf ears, because the perception is going to be, well, why find it if the guys who next to you already have it can't move it forward? And so, I've taken the view, the company has sort of taken the view that the better course of action is to sit tight until there's a little bit of clarity where good results can be appreciated, and that sentiment is, wow, there's something here that can be moved forward. So, that will certainly be a trigger point for us in terms of, if that Romero permit is granted, or clarity can be seen, or there's a change in perception that if you find it, you can extract it. We would then ramp back up and get active again. And I think having the financial wherewithal to do that is advantageous to us, because in a lot of cases in our business, there's sort of the chicken and egg thing where it's like, okay, we've got this project, now let's run out and generate some finances, and so that's in this case that's not required us this takes an infinite amount of time, and we deplete the treasury. The other path forward here, so that would be us saying, right, the light's back on, there's a return on investment here, we've got multiple targets that we've delineated for very little sort of expense, and now we can sort of ratchet things up with what would be target advancement drilling, really sort of hitting it hard. And I'd love to be in that position on the back of a receipt of permit. The flip side is, does Romero's permit grant generate sort of inbound interest and additional interest from other parties that, okay, we've seen this deposit, we've always liked it. I happen to know that a lot of people have sort of looked at the Romero deposit as a as a possible M&A or acquisition target, junior producers, mid-tier producers. So does that then, shift that focus whereby, sure, it would be great to have, a project, but would it be better to have, a district scale opportunity where, the consolidation of this belt becomes more attractive, say to, you brought up Barrick. I don't know if it would be them, but someone who would say, right, we've seen enough here. There is there is a starter resource that we think we can put into production, but more importantly, there is substantial exploration potential that needs to be tested, and let's get at it with a regional lens versus a project specific.
This it's kind of fascinating in a way, and gives us a sense of perhaps the conversations around the board table or on Zoom or wherever the board meetings happen these days. Is okay, we've got $5 million in the bank, right? We're being asked regularly, are we going to go out and buy the next big thing? You guys had that kind of little soft shoe shuffle up in Newfoundland back, and that was kind of like of the moment. And I don't necessarily want to talk about that today in any detail, but I will come back to it though. So people are saying, well, do you go off and find something else, the next big thing, whatever that may be? That's not easy to do because most projects will fall on their ass. Okay, whatever, however much money spent on them, most projects just are never to get into production. So I want to talk to you about that. I want to talk to you about is there a strategy which says maybe the best investment of that money that we've got in the bank, and a big question of perspective is, some people call it dilution. I'm sure intrigued to hear your argument as to, is there a case which says, look, that's sitting in the kitty to allow us to wait this thing out because this thing is so good, and if Gold Quest thing takes a little bit longer than planned, we need to be able to ride this thing out because the upside when this thing comes good is significant. So therefore, that might be the best use of that $5 million, for instance, right? There's another view of that $5 million. And the other one is, well, maybe if the market turns and things get a little bit more interesting out there. I mean, gold at over 2,500 an ounce is, pretty exciting, but maybe people want more, and maybe the equities markets need to come back into play as well. Maybe you say, well, let's maybe start moving things on the ground. Maybe let's not wait so much. So all of those things I'm sure are discussed at great length and have been over the months that you've had this project. But can you sort of talk through some of those more relevant choices that you are conscious of having to make or have made?
Yeah, and it's obviously dynamic. We think about this, we talk about this on an ongoing basis in terms of whatever the environment may be. But definitely the longer term strategy has been to be mindful of the treasury. As wonderful as the price of gold has been over the last couple of years, but certainly more recently, we still really haven't seen that reflected in the equities market. We still haven't really seen really good or even moderately good results translating into market cap and share price appreciation and access to additional capital. So, I look around at a lot of my peers that have done great work, great exploration work, delivered on what they set out to do, but not a lot of financial support for additional raises to continue on. So that's challenging. And when the market knows it's tough to get more money, your share price tends to soften again even further. So it's this vicious cycle. Having money tends to give you a little bit of strength when it relates to that. So yeah, I think protecting the treasury, but at the same time, look, we can't sit completely idle. So we do like to do some things. Recently, we've been doing some of this work with Wonder Rare. Quite frankly, I don't know whether or not that would have been something we would have talked a lot about in news releases, but the results came back and warranted that this was material enough that we wanted to put this out and let people know that there was some fairly compelling information coming from the project. But I think that as much as I look at, and we do look at a lot of other opportunities in other parts of the world in terms of possible acquisitions or options or even M&A, identifying something that we feel that we can bring about something different, that we can maybe, solve a problem. I mean, if a project's available, chances are there's a reason why it's available. So what is that that issue, and can we address it? Can we do something different? Do we bring something different to the party? And then what is it going to cost? What are the terms? And to go and acquire something and sort of blow up our current structure to acquire something new, it's we've got to feel pretty confident that it's going to deliver over time, and that it's justifiable for a share issuance or a cash deployment. And whereas our Dominican stuff is owned 100%, and so again, the cost of maintaining 100% rights to these projects and waiting it out a little bit doesn't really dip into the treasury too much. So it gives us the ability to be patient. Having said all of that, running a publicly listed company, there's a drain, and money does go out the door, and so you want to be positioned such that you can have some catalysts, some tangible catalysts at some point. And so for that reason, we're monitoring very closely the situation in the Dominican Republic, trying to get a sense of how realistic it may be that a permit may be granted for our neighbors, and if so, when. But also being very mindful of, well, if that takes longer than we hope or think, we do want to be pursuing other things that, again, can generate catalysts and create value for investors. So it's been a balancing act. We're still pursuing sort of both of those things simultaneously. And if and when the right thing comes along, where we can start to deploy that money, whether it's, the DR or somewhere else, we'll be happy to do it. But it's got to be the right deal.
For sure it's going to be the right deal. I mean, how many deals have you looked at recently? I mean,
yeah, we've got a running spreadsheet. It's about 80 names in the spreadsheet.
Wow.
We've looked at. Yeah.
When you say look, what's that? Like, are you looking at a PowerPoint, or are you looking at it in depth?
It varies, and sort of we segregate sort of what we're looking at in terms of, like, things we're looking at hard, things that are sort of getting a sort of quick skim, and things that may or may not really be a fit after a PowerPoint visit. But I mean, some we've done property visits, site visits. Some we've gone very far down a path with other parties. In some cases, it's included investment bankers or others that are sort of involved in the attempt to structure these deals. So yeah, it really is dictated, the depth at which we go is dictated by, on first review, are we interested enough to go a layer deeper? If we are, then we go deeper. You get into CAs, you potentially get into site visits. We spend a decent amount of time early on talking to management about their expectations of a deal, because, I don't want to necessarily send my geologist halfway around the world looking at things if CEO and I can't agree upon sort of the basic terms of what a deal would look like. So sometimes these things die a quick death because there's just no, sort of coming together in terms of what a deal would look like.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I've just been through it myself with my own project, and we ended. And it's such a good point you make, because there's got to be a kind of meeting of minds about expectations very early on, and certainly around not just the data and the data room, but also the value of that, and how you go about funding these things, and the type of deal structure for sure. And it's not necessarily always about the most amount of money on the table. It's about getting the right fit. So it's quite hard to do. Just if you don't mind, I'm just sort of fascinated with these decision making and having to manage market expectation and then doing the right thing, because those two things aren't necessarily always correlated, right? So going out and being kind of forced to do some M&A, or you feel under pressure to do some M&A because the market will value that for a while, and sometimes buys you some time. Clearly you don't subscribe to that, or you'd have rushed off and maybe spent some of that money that you've got.
Yeah, I think that definitely we have really sort of elevated our threshold and criteria for what we want to acquire. You made reference to the Newfoundland acquisition or option a couple of years ago, and I think that you get a couple of kicks at the can to try something different. And I feel like at this point I really don't want to just sort of kick the can on something else, and okay, it gets a bit of excitement, raise a little bit of money if we need to, and then it all dies a death. I mean, ultimately, that's where it gets challenging, is to try to find something that's, I think going to have some market appeal, that's going to be promotable, of course, we are in the business of that, that's going to have some sustained upside in terms of exploration and or news flow and catalysts, that's in a place where we think we can get business done. Again, do I want to sort of double down on sort of political uncertainty and risk? Not really. So again, that the world shrinks a bit when you start looking at where do we want to go that's sort of geopolitically friendly. And also, I think more importantly, taking a look inward at, what are we, how are we built, what are our strengths as a company and as a team, and finding projects that sort of fit for our skill set. So look, I've looked at some stuff that's, very attractive. It's, guys will come to me and say, hey, this thing, it's sort of turnkey production. Well, that's not what we do, and so, do I want to pick up a several million ounce deposit that's kind of just been stalled in trying to get into production or finance the production? No. We want to find things that fit our skill set, which is, earlier stage exploration, where, we can bring, a level of expertise or a different view. And again, as I said earlier, opportunities are available for a reason. There's some hairball, there's some glitch, there's some problem that the existing operator or owner has not been able to get over, and whether it's raising money or having money, or a regional thing or a geological thing. So we need to look at things also from the view of, what is that issue? Let's not pretend there's no issue. There's always going to be some issue as to why something's available, and do we bring something that can address that, or do we feel that we can address that? If it's money, sure, we got $5 million in the bank. If it's a project that needs $1.5 million to get to the next level, that's the kind of thing where, okay, we could put that in the ground. And so it's got to fit our skill set. And again, that's, you can get attracted by, interesting, shiny, attractive things, but then you look at it and say, well, why have these guys struggled? Why is it available? And if the reasons aren't things that we could do any better or different, it goes from one struggling junior to another struggling junior, and that doesn't benefit anybody. So you've got to really be selective about how are we going to tackle this in a different way with a different lens. And it's challenging to find things that fit. And again, financially, yes, we have money, but we don't have an infinite amount of money. So again, finding deals where ideally you can deploy the capital into the project after the deal. And so maybe make it an equity type deal or an option type deal where we don't blow our structure up at day one to hand over a bunch of cash to basically save somebody else. If you, seller, think that your project is so great that you want to, me to take it on, then let's get in the boat together and all have equity as the upside here, or success, exploration success as the upside. So let's buy into the real upside of the project, not, take the cash and run kind of thing. So again, finding all things that fit all of these criteria has been tough, but I look at it as a shareholder of Precipitate myself. What do shareholders of Precipitate, why do they own the shares? What is their objective and their goal for their investment in Precipitate? And I look at that as, I think for the most part, it's sort of three things. It's the Barrick earn-in agreement, whereby that land package was picked up for a song back in 2019, 2018. Barrick is spending money. If they find something that they warrant as being, something desirable to them, there will be some upside to that. Number two, you're waiting on this catalyst of a permit for Romero. And if that happens, I think that changes the landscape and it's game on there. And number three is the cash. Having cash gives us strength, gives us the flexibility to look at other opportunities or pivot back to the DR if that's what's deemed, to be the right thing. So those are the reasons why people own Precipitate. It's not for me to rush out and acquire something in some completely distinct jurisdiction that they've never heard of and don't know of, that may or may not pan out. And so I need to be mindful that, those are the people I'm working for.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I guess this comes back to there's a lot of moving parts conversation. The Barrick bit, I'm waiting. The permit bit, I'm waiting. The cash bit, I feel a bit more in control. I don't necessarily have to wait. I can go and try and do something. But if you do decide to do something, you've got to believe that the market's going to value it. And I'm not sure that the normal rules of mining have applied for the last 4 years. I've been saying it for 4 years. I say the normal rules when I was in banking, looking if certain things happened, I knew what the outcome would be. I knew what was going to happen next. I knew what the market reaction was going to be. And it hasn't worked like that for 4 years. It's really, really bizarre, despite a kind of reasonably strong price environment. Obviously, costs have gone up at various points laterally for all the usual reasons that we suspect. But what do you think the market would value if you said, right, okay, we've got this money, we're going to do something. We've got to do something. We can't sit and wait. I personally would be very happy waiting, using the cash to wait, but let's assume that not enough people are. And you go, okay, I'm going to deploy this capital. What would be the number one thing on everyone's list that you should do?
Well, I don't know what the number one thing on everyone's list would be, other than I suspect it would be to acquire something that we have a pathway to 100%. Again, I talked to some guys, well, we do 70, 30. No, I don't want that. As a junior company, 2 juniors in a deal, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Let's get 100% pathway to 100% for Precipitate. Let's be in a jurisdiction where we can shorten the timelines for permitting and getting things done, and be a little bit more efficient with time and money. And something that fits our skill set, something that's got exploration potential. And really, for me, and I think for our shareholders, look, there's no question. This is a swing for the fences type of story, right? People who invest in Precipitate Gold aren't looking for a double. I mean, this is what we're all hoping for here is something substantial and the big home run. And so when we look at projects, both technically and from a corporate perspective, is there enough land or geological potential for if we are successful? And again, exploration is a heartbreaker, so we may not be, but if we were successful, is there the possibility that there could be something there that would be attractive to a major, a Barrick, a Newmont, or someone like that, who ultimately would want to come in and take it on? So that, again, we're looking for these swing for the fences type opportunities that you can find out potential relatively quickly. A discovery hole changes everything.
But that's what you're saying. You're saying, Ben, you think that the market values exploration potential and that they still value a discovery. But those two things are quite far apart sometimes. I know lots of explorers who have never made a discovery, right, in their lives, let alone on any project they're working on any given time. Because the last thing you want to be, I think you said this, you certainly referred it to me, or I thought you did. You don't want to be a prospect generator, because that's a very long lead item in terms of value creation. I think, in terms of doing that as a pure play model, you want to be, the core competency is exploration. You want to go do exploration. If you were to spend your money, then finding an asset you can work your way to 100% of on an exploration basis to be able to make discoveries. That's where you think the real value is of the market, but it's hard to find.
Yes, it is hard to find, and I would say that, again, everything is relative to the environment that we're in, and I completely agree with you to your point that we are in an environment where I don't know what acquisition would get everybody riled up and excited and piling on. So again, it's not what I get up in the morning to do, but patience can sometimes be the right pathway. And so I've been worried from time to time over the course of this process that, oh geez, gold's 2,200. Oh geez, gold's 2,400. Gold's 2,500. Am I going to miss the boat? Are we missing the market? And all of a sudden we're chasing something. That hasn't happened yet. And so you want to be ahead of that curve, that if the market does start to run, you've already picked up your asset, you've got your sort of value proposition, and you're not chasing. But at the same time, if I'd done that when I first thought that was the market we were in, it would have been 1.5 years, 2 years ago, and we'd be out X $1 million because we'd have to do work and moving things forward. So yeah, I still, the criteria for which we are searching still exists. And I think it is, as you pointed out, it's exploration, it's discovery potential. It's a deal that makes sense, but I don't feel to this point that we've missed a boat by not having entered into something yet, because I just don't know what the value driver for shareholders would have been to this point, short of, an absolute world-class discovery hole or something like that, if we'd been lucky enough.
Oh, no, I totally agree with you. Having sort of interviewed companies week in, week out, I'm not sure anything has really kind of moved the market except for that absolutely, well, extraordinary type numbers that we see all too rarely. So I think the smart thing was to keep your money in your pocket, quite frankly. And I honestly think it still is. So patience required. I think I have some. I think I understand your model more clearly now. And I think, and I get why you think Dominican. Don't give them the Dominican Republic. It's got a lot going for it, but it's going to take some time. Have you got the willpower? Has your board got the willpower to kind of wait this thing out? If this thing's going still, if it's still in the same position in 10 years' time, will you be here?
10 years is a long time. I'm hesitant to comment on that. But yeah, I think we've got the patience. I think we've put a lot of time and effort into our relationships and communication with the government, with local people, with local decision makers, with GoldQuest. I mean, I communicate quite regularly with the GoldQuest management team again to make sure that we're aligned and that we're not giving mixed messages, etc. We all are pulling on the same rope to try to get to the same end game there. So I think, yes, patience there, but at the same time, again, this is people's investment that we're sort of dealing with here, and I take that very seriously. Again, I've said that earlier here. I take it very seriously in terms of who I work for. And what the objectives of people are. And to this point, and I speak to shareholders all the time, whether it's by email or phone or in person, and the sentiment is that there's still, an underlying belief that the timelines to some resolutions here is reasonable. At such time as some catalyst changes that, then of course we need to be dynamic and we can't be short-sighted, and we've got to make decisions to maybe move on. But at present, at very, very little holding costs, we can sit on these assets and try to kind of move forward to add value, but simultaneously keeping one eye on what else might be out there to be a more near-term value proposition.
Because would it be safe to say, I keep going to wrap this up, but you keep saying things which are going to get me going. Would you say that you've been successful technically in that you found what you're looking for? This seems to be because with the Barrick thing, it seems like you have something good, you managed to do a deal, and I think that's in your back pocket. There's always that's real value there. With your Juan de Herrera project, you've got something good there, but it's not the technical aspect that's holding you up. It's literally social license that's holding you up.
It is, and it's even a little bit more tricky than that, in that as much as we've continued to talk about permits for our neighbor GoldQuest, that is an exploitation permit, which is essentially a permit for them to do geotechnical drilling for feasibility study. We have all of our permits for exploration. We've had drill permits. We've had all the licenses to do whatever we wish to do on our project. Our view has been more strategic in that, sure, we have the permits, but if local people don't want a mine to be built, if that turns out to be the case, what's the point in spending potentially tens of millions of dollars to find a deposit that'll never be extracted? So we feel as if this is a place where there's still a substantial amount of unknowns as it relates to our project, and delineating these targets with relatively inexpensive, field work, sampling, prospecting, mapping has been beneficial. Like I said earlier on, we delineated 8 new zones out of basically a field program with just boots on the ground. It's, and so this project still has a lot of questions to be answered. And that's what I like in the exploration business is, are there targets? Are there areas where you need to find out more? And having that in spades as we do on this project is really what, the excitement is about and the upside is about. And if you can do that situated next to an existing multi-million ounce deposit, in this case Romero, it makes the entire region that much more prospective and interesting. So that's why we're there. That's why we stayed there, and that's why, in a perfect environment, if we felt like we could get a real return on investment from positive news, there's a lot of work that we would envision doing. And at present, we've got the financial wherewithal to execute on it. It's just a matter of getting the comfort that it's the right time.
Jeff, appreciate the update today. Really, really interesting. I mean, it feels like it's not going to take much to pop this the right direction. It's kind of got that torque to it if one or more of these things comes off for you. And I think, like I say, I think I'm patient enough to maybe move forward with a bit more work on this, and we'll see where we go from there. Okay. Appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Been a pleasure. Thanks, Matt.